This is a very personal process. There's a lot of feelings and emotions that are going into this, and it's a lot of hard discussions that some people haven't had before.
When do I need to take Social Security? What does my retirement plan look like? Many people don't know.
Why are we going to take certain actions? What things in the future do we need to address?
What is your goal for retirement? Do you plan to stay in a house and not travel? Or maybe they have charitable reasons for doing things that we need to know about as well. So it's really details.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Chimes Dimes, brought to you by First Wealth and Trust here in historic Winter Garden. I'm Pete Baksh, Chief Investment Officer at First Wealth and Trust and the First National Bank. I'm joined today by Alice Taft and Fran Amato, who's one of the portfolio managers on my team. And before we get into starting anything, want to thank the Winter Garden Art Association and the SOBO Gallery for giving us this space to use for this filming. The Winter Garden Art Association is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that has a dedication to providing a facility and programs that nurture individuals and foster growth in the arts in the area. The SOBO Gallery is located right here on South Boyd Street in historic downtown Winter Garden. Today's episode we're calling Playing the Long Game, because not too long from now there's going to be a big game that everybody knows about, and we kind of tend to think that financial planning, which is the topic of this talk, is the long game, not the short game. We think people get confused sometimes and think, oh, well, it's about what's your performance like in the market, or did you do better than your neighbor, or this or that, when in reality, planning out your financial plan and knowing what targets you need to hit is a very long game and requires a lot of depth and thinking. But I say, to get into it, how about we have you kick it off, Alice?
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your role with the clients with respect to helping them develop and think about their financial plan.
So what I do, I'm a certified trust and fiduciary advisor and accredited estate planner. What that means is we work on your estate plan. But ultimately, in that estate plan, you have assets that require financial advice. And that is what Pete and Fran here do to help you create a goal in mind. And when I sit down with a client, we go through the estate plan, but then we also talk about what investments do you have? Do you have retirement? Do you have Social Security coming up? What are all these things that are going to happen in your life? And that's where we bring Fran in and say, because he's a certified financial planner and can help us determine, when do I need to take Social Security? What does my retirement plan look like? Many people don't know. And it's a very good source for us to use.
Sure. And I mean, from my perspective, as strictly speaking, the investment person, the portfolio strategist, we're looking to find the best way that we can, get from point A to point B. What Fran is doing, and I'm going to have you introduce yourself and maybe a little bit about your background as well in a second, but what that aspect of what we do is concerned with is, why are we going to take certain actions? What things in the future do we need to address? What plans in the future do we need to address? What contingencies and so forth? Because there is that idea of those who plan, fail to plan, or actually planning to fail. You want to give me some insight?
The financial planning process, a lot of people think of it as a numbers-based math equation, and some of the things that we're trying to uncover is those types of deeper things beneath it. So the why of things are happening, and the bottom line, it's a goals-based approach that we're trying to solve for. So can the client and their family meet their goals, and what is the chance of success that they can do that? And a lot of times when they're coming to us, they don't know where to start on that. And we're just looking to say, here's your starting point, here's where you are, here's what we can do and work together with to complete your goals. And that's the essence of the start of the process.
And I know the number one thing I hear from clients is, am I going to outlive my money? So that's a goal that they have. They want to make sure they have enough money to survive.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And this is a very personal process. There's a lot of feelings and emotions that are going into this. And it's a lot of hard discussions that some people haven't had before. So as advisors and as we're working with them, we help to facilitate those conversations as well.
So that's an interesting point that I hadn't really considered as much, but the emotional nature of some of those conversations, and you're kind of interjecting into the middle of that.
Yes.
What are some of the, I suppose, standards of care that you're operating with? Perhaps through the CFAP program, they've given you guidance in this respect, or your own experience. But it seems to me like it involves a pretty high level of empathy.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest elephants in the room is definitely going to be that your plan has an expectancy or a mortality at the end of it. And that is something that we are very careful to navigate around. A lot of it also involves family history. For example, when certain illnesses or family history comes into play, and kind of dealing with that. And even on the other hand, with what Alice said, outliving your money, we look at, we recently had someone that their parents both lived into their 90s and 100s.
Yeah.
And that's an important consideration to have as well on the other side of the coin.
And then when I thought I did a really good job of figuring out their assets, we got them in a managing agency trust type situation. Lo and behold, we talked to Fran, we've got $100,000 in I-bonds over here. And, you just find more assets. So it's kind of funny that just bringing you in, they made them think about all the other things that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and those assets have to be accounted for at the disposition of the trust and all this. It's an interesting point, but you did mention a term there that not everyone might be familiar with. So managing agency versus trust, what is that for the layman?
A lot of times people will just have a trust, but they want us to manage their assets, their investments. And so we enter into what's called a managing agency, where I'm just an agent for those people. They tell me what I need to do, but we manage all the investments and make sure that their goals that we worked with Fran to set up are going to work for them.
Yeah, and I'll go one level further with that. The managing agency relationships are kind of what we're doing with our investment strategy over everything. That means that we actually actively make all of the investment decisions for those accounts.
Right,
correct?
right.
So
And
we're
we
not
won't be making trust decisions. We're doing the investment decisions.
This is investment management as distinct from just the general administration of the trust. It is a silo within it.
Right. Yeah, another huge thing that we see in that area is when we take a look at their entire financial situation and all their assets, we see some opportunities that we might not necessarily be able to manage ourselves, but we can provide advice on to help them get in the right place. For example, 401ks that a lot of people have might not be very well set up in terms of the allocation and how it fits in with their assets that we're managing here. And integrating those has been really helpful to a lot of clients as well.
So I'm going to stop there because there are again going to be people potentially not familiar with allocation.
Yeah, so just the mix of stocks and bonds in your account. A lot of the times when you have a 401k, the investment mix is kind of automatically generated based on your age or things like that. And that's not always possibly the right way to do it.
Agreed. And I'm going to take us back a level and get you with this one. And that is, you mentioned that when we get a holistic look at the picture, there are accounts with us, there are accounts at maybe Schwab or, Goldman Sachs, wherever it is they're getting their accounts managed. A lot of times each individual investment manager, if they are, or broker or financial advisor, if they are, is managing that account in isolation as if that's the only money that the client has. And so as a result, you wind up with some, let's call them less than ideal allocations.
Exactly.
As you defined it, the mix of stocks and bonds. Maybe you have too much of one sector, too little of another. And when we step back in the context of a financial planner looking at things, you get a much better read. And even though you can't make the changes in the other accounts, you can adjust what you're doing to make sure that overall they're in the right place. Am I correct? And tell me a little bit about maybe a situation where you've had that happen. Obviously, no names or any identifiers.
And it doesn't even always have to be necessarily an investment account. There's been several times where we've seen clients that are holding savings and emergency funds, which is, of course, a great thing to do that we recommend to everyone. But to have those emergency funds in a low or no interest rate account that had been there for a number of years, maybe it was good in the past, but with the rates coming up, as we've seen, we've been able to put those into something that's actually earning them money at the same time as keeping it safe. So not just the investments, but also savings.
And you know what I've seen a lot of too is people keeping their 401k even though they don't work there anymore. And when they can maybe get a better diversification, rolling that over to an IRA.
Yes.
Yeah, that fits their portfolio a little bit better.
Yeah, and I am going to take a step back too and add, we talk about 401k. We also put into the same category IRAs, which you might have, or other types of, retirement accounts. It might be through the schools. It might be pension plans. We're talking in the general terms, whereas that was a specific term used, but that is a little bit bigger of a universe for those of you out there. In terms of financial planning, let's talk about the kind of things that, you're using to discover that there's a need for it and why when you're meeting with a client before bringing Fran in.
When I sit down and talk to them, I ask them, do you have a plan? Do you have a retirement plan? No, I've got a retirement account, here and there. And I said, well, we need to, maybe talk about a future goal, to make sure you're covered throughout your retirement life. So then we sit down and go through all the assets, but then there's always some that are missed that come along later when we do the financial planning tool. We also talk about transitions in your life. Like maybe you get to a point where you don't want to have a big house anymore and you don't want to, take care of it. And you maybe want to buy a condo or something in the future where, it's an over 55 property where you don't have to maintain anything. How does that fit into the plan? There's a lot of scenarios where we want to make sure if those life changes happen that you're covered. And so it's very important to talk to a financial planner on that.
Gotcha. And now, Fran, once you're brought in as the planner, there's a process that you're going to implement and that I'm assuming most, if not all planners are going to implement. Can you walk us through what that looks like? Because I know for people out there in the audience are probably thinking, this sounds a little intimidating. I got to come up with a lot of information and give it to someone I don't know very well. Am I comfortable with that? And how's the information being handled and used? Let's air that.
Yeah, so it's a goals-based approach. So the goal is going to be the center of the entire process. And a lot of people struggle to come up with what their retirement goal is. For example, some folks might have a goal of, I want to spend all the money for the rest of my life and end up with $0, right? And some people want to pass it on to their kids. But we don't always find out about that goal of passing it on to their kids until later on in the process, for example. So we want to start right away. Okay, what is everyone that's going to be involved? Are there kids? Are you having an estate plan integrated into this? And then actually putting numbers to things. Like the most common number one goal is travel. I want to travel every year, and we have a trip that we want to do. Well, that's a big deal, and we want to make sure that you can achieve that. So let's actually think about and put some numbers to, okay, it's going to cost maybe X amount of dollars. And then why don't we, instead of using that number, let's use something that's even higher to have a little bit of margin of safety in there. Other goals, of course, are healthcare and Medicare and things like that. That's a big concern for people is, am I going to be covered, while I'm aging and that process? And Alice works a lot in that aging sense of things. So really formulating the goals, that's where a lot of the discussion and a lot of the front end things are happening with the client. But once we have that information, it's a really good start for us to kind of do our work and move it along into the next steps.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And, on an ongoing basis, there's a conversation with the clients, right? You're meeting with them frequently, however many times a year. I guess that depends on the client preference, really.
Right.
But at those meetings, what kind of discussion goes on? Is it things like what's changed? Give me some or give the viewer insight.
It's really just talking about their lives, what's going on in their lives. Maybe they've got kids graduating from college, getting ready to be married. It may be, like I said, trying to transition to a condo, or maybe it's, they want a lake house in addition to the current house they have. A lot of it is, what can I afford to do?
Yeah.
And so with Fran's project, we could do some what if scenarios. If I spent X amount of money on this, what does that do me later in life, in my later retirement years? So really it's constantly, hey, what's going on in your world? Any big things happening? And if they say, yes, I've got this going on, then we might want to go back to that goal plan and say, let's look at it and see what it's going to do to you.
Yeah, I might add something to that too, which is, of course, nobody wants to run out of money. But another thing that we've had to wrestle with in the past is that people don't want to go to their later years and find out that I could have been spending more money
Right.
and being more fulfilled in what I'm doing. So that's a big area that we've actually caused some surprises when we sit down with the client and say, hey, you thought that your goals would amount to this much per year, but actually we would encourage you that this is a larger number, that you can still achieve your goals while doing that.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think people tend to get a little bit overly conservative and underestimate what they have versus what they're capable of doing,
Right.
later on down the road. And this is where some of the back end of this process comes in, but I'm going to lay the groundwork for the discussion as we talk about that. Underlying a lot of these forecasts that are made, as Fran mentioned earlier, it's probabilistic. In other words, it's telling you, well, we think that based on what we've done, crunching these numbers, you've got an X% chance of achieving your goals. And generally, we're shooting for a very high percentage, like 80, 90%, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And there's a complex mathematics underneath that, but that's not important or germane to this discussion. What is important is we have the ability to run these forecasts that are fairly accurate and give you a decent picture as to what's going on in the future. You can't say, yes, you're going to achieve this result. No one can tell anybody anything with any certainty. That doesn't just go for financial planning, by the way. That goes for any investment.
Right.
And so with that said, you're framing this, probabilistic framework that says, hey, you've got X now, you're going to input or take out Y over each year. And, you've got the discrete goals that are happening over time, and you can give this person a timeline and say, yes, with some percentage confidence, we know you're going to hit this goal. Walk us through what that looks like and maybe how it's delivered to the client and how that enhances the conversation and the client's overall well-being. I know I just gave you a lot, but
Yeah, an awful lot.
Yeah.
No, I think my clients, once they get that report back, they are so very happy to actually see it in person. You can think all the years, yes, I'm going to have plenty of money, or no, I need to be at this level. There's a certain number in my mind that I have to be at. But when they see that document and they look at what they can and can't do, it really gives them some peace of mind.
And importantly with that, it's, like you mentioned, it's at a point in time. And also, like you mentioned, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So we sit there and tell them, well, look, this is what it's like right now. If everything went according exactly to this plan, it would be great, it would be beautiful. But in reality, we know that that's not going to happen in real life. So the key is to follow up and continue to monitor and update this in those discussions that you've had. Is there a change to your situation? And because we've done the groundwork of actually putting these numbers and plans into place, all we have to do is go in there and update that with the new information, with higher or lower, and it's already set up right there. So it's a recurring living thing that we can continue to use as a great tool.
And I suppose just to kind of, before we wrap it up, I'm going to ask you as a financial planner, as distinct from your role as a portfolio manager and the way that I view things, is there anything I've missed that the viewers need to know about in terms of this process?
I would say the biggest thing is that this can certainly be an intimidating process, okay? Because you are looking at providing information about your Social Security amounts and possible pensions and how much is in your different accounts all over the place. And, what I would say to that is to trust the process. We are going to be extremely confidential and work with you. And if there's information that you don't even want to provide, that's fine. But we try to put it in the biggest and most robust picture of your entire situation to have the best outcome. So yeah, we understand it's a little bit scary and intimidating, and we've done these plans ourselves and on our own finances, but just trust the process and it will work out.
The last thing I would ask, from your perspective, let's say you're inviting the client to a first-time planning meeting. What kinds of things are they needing to be thinking about or bringing? I know that you're providing her with a checklist of documents and things like that, but so what does a meeting like that look like?
Yeah, we really need to know and need to know their honesty. What investments do you have elsewhere? And we don't care where they are. We need to know the details. We need to know life insurance policies. We need to know, what is your goal for retirement? Do you plan to stay in a house and not travel? Or some people don't like to travel. Maybe they have charitable reasons for doing things that we need to know about as well. So it's really details, and it is a lot of work, but ultimately it pays off with a final result. I know one of the things we didn't cover maybe that my clients ask is, how do you know how much my portfolio is going to make over those years? So, maybe it's an average or an estimate of what the market does.
So that's an interesting question that I'll take. We have these things, and again, this is an arcane topic. I won't go too deeply into the weeds with it, but we have these assumptions that we make by looking at many years of, returns, all of the good years, all of the bad years. We get the average of those over long periods of time. And then we look at the risk, which risk is just boils down to how much does it swing, one way or the other. I could use fancy words like volatility, but it really doesn't matter. It's how much things are moving. And when you have a good appreciation of both of those, you can really extrapolate out a very good forecast. That's all it is a forecast. However, those tend to actually track reality because they're made up of, an average of the past over a long enough period. I mean, that's the nuts and bolts of it. So when they ask that question, yes, we can actually credibly make those assumptions for the reasons, that I just described. Backing it up a level, is there, any kind of idea of, say, who this is for, and is this really a scary process? We've been talking about some really complex things. Is this something to be intimidated about, and is this something for everybody?
I think if you're curious about your retirement plan and you want to have more information, I think it's for anyone at all. So we're here to help you kind of put that together. We give you ideas on how to proceed. It's for anyone who has, little money or a lot of money, and we're here to do it for free. And it is a process, and it can be intimidating, but it's well worth it in the end.
Great.
Yeah, and timeline wise, of course, they say it's never too early to make a plan, but we've had clients that are just approaching retirement or even already retired, and they want to make sure that they're on the right track with what they're doing. So it's never too late, never too early. It's always a good time to start.
It's always a good time to make a plan.
Yeah.
All right, so you mentioned free within what it is we do with our process. Let's elaborate on that a little bit. Maybe there's some misunderstanding as to what that means. So
sure, when we're talking to clients about their investments and their wealth management, it's an estate plan. That's just part of another tool that we use in the process. And if something that it is required, we'll bring it to our CFPs and have them work on that. They do require that information be provided. And it does take a little time to do that, but it's well worth it in the end.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think it's worth noting that, there are financial planning firms out there that do charge a flat fee for this that's separate from any of the other offerings that they do. That is not a part of our platform. Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening that's out there doing that. Remember, investments are a really complex topic, and these are general in nature. Any specific things that we've been talking about really need to be discussed with an advisor in that area. So the legal stuff we talk about needs to be discussed with a lawyer, planning stuff with a planner, investment stuff with investments, and trust with the trust people that are in that business, the administrators and the attorneys. If you found this video useful, which we hope you have, subscribe, share with anyone that you think might enjoy this content as well. And, reach out to us if you have any questions on this matter. We love to talk to you.